The Trump administration's America First policy sent shockwaves through Europe, leaving leaders and citizens alike questioning the future of a partnership that had long been taken for granted. Suddenly, the transatlantic relationship, once seen as unbreakable, was thrown into uncertainty. The foundation of a decades-old alliance was shaken, as trust and predictability gave way to doubt and concern. Almost overnight, tariffs were imposed on European goods, sparking fears of a trade war, and long-standing NATO commitments were openly questioned, leaving European nations to wonder about their own security. In response, European leaders began to talk seriously about strategic autonomy, a dramatic shift from the post-Cold War era of transatlantic unity, where Europe often looked to Washington for leadership and reassurance. The 2008 financial crisis, the rapid rise of China as a global power, and the unpredictability of U.S. foreign policy only deepened Europe's unease, highlighting the risks of over-reliance on a single ally. The old assumption that America would always have Europe's back started to fade, replaced by a growing sense that Europe needed to take more responsibility for its own future. Today, European leaders openly debate not whether, but how to become more independent, discussing everything from defense to technology, energy, and economic policy. The ties between Europe and America, economic, military, and cultural, run deep, and the shared history is undeniable. Yet, the political will for change is growing stronger with each passing year. The goal isn't to turn against America, but to create a more balanced partnership, one where Europe stands as an equal, not a junior partner. Europe wants to be a strong, decisive actor on the world stage, shaping its own destiny and making its own choices, rather than simply following Washington's lead. The journey is complex, filled with challenges and setbacks, but recent events have made it clear: Europe must chart its own course if it wants to thrive in a rapidly changing world. The era of relying solely on a transatlantic big brother is ending, as Europe seeks to step out of America's shadow and define its own role. Now, the conversation is about building a Europe that can defend its interests, militarily, economically, and diplomatically, whether or not Washington agrees or participates. This is about partnership, not dependence. Europe seeks cooperation, but also the strength to stand alone when necessary. Europe's future will be shaped by its ability to stand on its own 2 feet, to innovate, to compete, and to lead in a world where old certainties no longer apply. The world is watching as a new era for Europe begins, one defined by resilience, ambition, and a renewed sense of purpose. The EU and US share one of the world's largest and most complex economic relationships, built over decades of cooperation, negotiation, and shared interests. Every day, billions of dollars in goods, services, and investments cross the Atlantic, fueling industries, supporting millions of jobs, and connecting people on both continents. This partnership has brought prosperity, created countless jobs, and driven innovation in fields from technology to manufacturing. But it has also created a sense of dependency, as both sides rely heavily on each other for economic stability and growth. The dominance of the US dollar in global finance gives Washington outsized influence over European companies and even government policies, shaping decisions far beyond American borders. When the US imposes sanctions, European firms often have no choice but to comply, even when these measures conflict with EU interests or policies, highlighting the power imbalance in the relationship. Recent tariffs on European steel and aluminum expose just how vulnerable Europe can be when it relies on US goodwill, sparking protests and debates about economic sovereignty. As a result, many Europeans are now questioning whether the US remains a reliable trade partner, or if Europe needs to chart a more independent course. The push isn't to end trade with America, but to rebalance the relationship, reduce strategic dependency, and ensure Europe can act in its own interests when needed. Europe's goal is to build an economic system that is resilient to political shifts in Washington, capable of withstanding external shocks, and able to protect its own industries and workers. The challenge ahead is to achieve greater autonomy without losing the immense benefits of transatlantic cooperation, which has long been a source of strength for both sides. Ultimately, the goal is a partnership of equals, one built on mutual respect, shared values, and balanced interests, rather than dependence or dominance. As the world changes, Europe is rethinking its economic future, seeking new ways to thrive in a rapidly evolving global landscape. To reduce vulnerability, Europe must strengthen its internal market. Heavy reliance on exports, especially to the US and China, leaves Europe exposed to external shocks. The answer: boost domestic demand through investment in infrastructure, green energy, and digital networks. Raising wages and improving social safety nets will put more money in people's pockets, fueling growth from within. A strong internal market of 450 million consumers is a powerful asset. This shift isn't about abandoning trade but about building resilience. By unlocking its own potential, Europe can chart a more independent economic path. True autonomy starts at home. Europe can't afford to rely on just one or two major trading partners. Diversification is key, signing deals with Japan, Canada, Vietnam, and others to spread risk and shape global trade rules. New opportunities lie in Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia. Investing in these regions builds mutually beneficial partnerships and reduces vulnerability to US or Chinese pressure. A unified European trade policy is essential for negotiating strong deals. Building trust with new partners takes time, but it's a necessary investment. Diversification increases Europe's influence and security in a multipolar world. The future belongs to those who build broad, resilient networks. Europe is laying the groundwork for true economic independence. Europe's fragmented financial markets are a major weakness. Unlike the US, Europe lacks a single deep capital market, making it hard for businesses to access funding. The solution: a genuine capital markets union, breaking down barriers and creating a unified market for investment. This would help European companies grow and make the euro a stronger global currency. A robust capital market would reduce dependence on US finance and the dollar's dominance. Building the CMU requires harmonizing rules and overcoming national interests, a tough but vital task. Without it, Europe's financial system remains vulnerable and dependent. The CMU is essential for true economic sovereignty. Europe must act now to secure its financial future. For over 70 years, Europe relied on US military protection through NATO. This comfort led to chronic underinvestment in European defense. Recent US statements have made Europe's vulnerability clear. American support is no longer guaranteed. Europe must now consider how to defend itself, even without US help. The push for strategic autonomy in defense is about building a stronger European pillar within NATO. Europe needs the capacity to act independently, especially in its own neighborhood. This means investing in equipment, logistics, and readiness. The goal: Europe as a producer, not just a consumer, of security. Taking responsibility for its own defense is now a strategic imperative. The time for complacency is over. The war in Ukraine has forced Europe to confront its military shortcomings, exposing vulnerabilities that had long been overlooked. The devastation in Ukrainian cities is a stark reminder of the real and present dangers facing the continent. While Europe has shown impressive unity in supporting Kyiv, much of the most critical military and financial aid has come from the United States, highlighting Europe's dependence on its transatlantic ally. To sustain support for Ukraine and build its own security, Europe must urgently ramp up defense production, reopening shuttered factories, investing in new technologies, and expanding its industrial base to meet modern threats. Joint procurement and coordinated spending across nations are essential to avoid duplication, reduce waste, and ensure that European forces can operate together with maximum efficiency and interoperability. More money is certainly needed, but smarter, more strategic spending matters most. Allocating resources where they will have the greatest impact on collective defense. Strengthening defense isn't just about acquiring new hardware, it's about investing in training, building robust logistics networks, and ensuring troops are ready for rapid deployment when crises arise. Regular joint exercises will ensure that European forces can work together seamlessly, building trust and operational cohesion across borders. The task ahead is immense, requiring political will and public support, but the cost of unpreparedness is far greater. History has shown the dangers of neglecting defense. Ukraine's war is a wake-up call for all of Europe. To ensure peace and security, Europe must rebuild credible military power. True security starts with readiness, resilience, and unity. Europe's reliance on US military technology undermines its strategic autonomy. Buying American means long-term dependence on US suppliers, maintenance, and political approval. This drains European defense budgets and stifles local innovation. To act independently, Europe needs sovereign capabilities, free from external control. The solution: prioritize European-made equipment and invest in joint projects like the Future Combat Air System. This approach strengthens Europe's industrial base and breaks the cycle of dependence. It requires political will and trust among member states. Building a self-sufficient defense industry is essential for autonomy. Europe must invest in its own security future. Achieving autonomy demands EU reform. The current structure, slow, consensus-based, hampers decisive action, especially in foreign policy. Moving toward qualified majority voting would allow the EU to act swiftly, even if some members disagree. This is sensitive, but inaction leaves Europe vulnerable. Countering foreign influence, especially from US tech giants, is also crucial. Stronger regulation will protect Europe's democracy from manipulation and disinformation. Strategic autonomy requires a resilient economy, robust defense, and faster decision-making. This isn't anti-Americanism, it's about a stronger, more sovereign Europe. Europe must become a true partner, not a dependent. The future of Europe depends on its ability to act decisively in a changing world.